So by now you have a lot of information about what are drugs, what are the offenses, and the procedures by the police, etc. But one peculiar question is, why do you want to do this course in the first place? And although this information should have come to you in module 1 when you started this, but nevertheless, too late, never too late. We don't care because clearly we're not on drugs. Moving on. NDPS is not something that is stagnant for a while. It is something that is changing in a constantly evolving world with applications from medicinal, scientific, evolutionary purposes to now something that forms as the basis of our ecosystem in the first place. Yes, you do hear that absolutely right. The basis of everything in the first place is also something that is in question with regard to ingredients that are classified as contraband under the NDPS Act, be it opium, coca, or other psychotropics, whatever. The three questions I asked you in that, I asked you one very specific question. What is the legality of hallucinogenic mushrooms in India? Yes, I clearly haven't been able to find a notification, and neither have been able to find a case law in which somebody was found in possession of psilocybin mushrooms and thereafter a trial ensued and they were convicted of any sorts, which tells us something that we should look at. Why has this not happened till date? It tells us that not only the government or the courts have fallen behind with regard to the developments and evolution of how drugs were perceived from 1960s in US to 2023 in India, जहाँ पे a lot of hemp oil, a lot of CBD oil, a lot of THC oil is already being legally sold on Amazon across India, even outside India, for the purpose of alleviating pain, just getting out of a stressful phase in your life, or just dealing with things where normal traditional medicines don't come to the rescue. And that is just cannabis or hemp, which tells you that abhi ek part legalize ho gaya hai, which tells you ki lawyers ke liye there's an avenue that is opening now, which is going to be the licensing of cannabis work. Now, how will licensing work is not just the consumer to aggregator to finally manufacturer, the way it happened in the time of British, जहाँ पे cultivator को अब agent के साथ और agent को finally government के साथ deal करना पड़ता था. But other licensing work such as what is the application, the scientific industry, अगर किसी को एक नई research lab set up करनी है, what are the compliances they need to be going through? For example, जब आप एक दारू की कंपनी खोलते हो, you have to abide by the laws of the state, जहाँ पे state की excise rules, आपकी fees जितनी लगती है, then liaising with whosoever is selling it at the root, basically ठेके पे जो आपका ठेका इंचार्ज बैठता है, how will he go ahead and push your product forward? Similar things will come with regard to cannabis, because of which very thing that it is something that trips you up, that gives you a high. And cannabis अब किस तरीके से आप ले पाओगे? What is the fees that you'll have to deposit with the government? What is the set of conditions you need to qualify, or the requirements you're supposed to meet in order to get these licenses from the government is going to follow in the coming years? And that is very much clear considering the fact that India has taken a stand before the UN stating that cannabis will be decriminalized back in 2021 and 2 years from there. But that also means that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when can be a year from now or 10 years from now, but the industry in general is going to go through a boom that will be unprecedented for reasons that India is the 7th largest country in the world with having a terrain and a forest cover which can and is habitable for cannabis, different strains of it, from something that is used as premium quality hashish in Malana, like I mentioned in module 1, to something that is just landrace found in several parts of northeastern region. Coming back to the question of shrooms, as I was mentioned before, and now you are probably wondering that I went from point A to point B without going through C, but clearly I'm not on drugs, so why shrooms is a very important question. Mushrooms, before I go into the legality and what it does to you, before advertising the fact that whether it should be decriminalized, legalized, or sold at pharmacies or just available to everybody, it's said that 97% of all the matter which is under the earth, basically under the soil, is comprising of a mycelium network. The mycelium network is basically mushrooms. So 97% of your land ecosystem is comprising of mushrooms. That tells you that something interesting is going on over there which you or I probably did not know before we were apprised of this fact. There's a very interesting guy called Paul Stamets. He appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast. He's been in the field of conducting research in the field of mushrooms, the medicinal properties, the way it transfers nutrients to your brain. Again, another interesting fact, mushrooms is actually one of the very, very, very few things. In fact, you can even consider it as a rare ingredient which transfers nutrients to your brain in comparison to any other medicine that you may take otherwise, or any other supplements, or any other thing that you're prescribed by your hakim, by your aushadhi wala, and etc. etc. Which brings us to the pharmacology sector. Pharmacology is going to definitely embrace mushrooms. In fact, it already has, just not the psilocybin mushrooms, but if you can just go on Google or just open up your Amazon, you will find strains such as reishi, such as cordyceps, such as lion's mane, and n number of mushrooms are out there. And these are being, in fact, commercially used, and a lot of labs have been set up, especially in the hilly regions of India, such as Dehradun and Mussoorie, जहाँ पे अब ये बड़े-बड़े labs एक world demand को cater कर रहे हैं. And it's only a matter of time, like I said, in the case of cannabis, that psilocybin mushrooms will also again come in the same picture. And the regulation, the licenses, the export, the import, and the very fact, the criminality of which is going to be not just some policy work that will be handled by the researchers of MPs who are going to probably put forward a bill in the coming years. But more than the policy, it will also be about the regulation on certain transactional lawyers in the corporate field now. It's be having to specialize in this specific field of pharmacology and drugs that are considered as contraband under NDPS again. And that's how the industry is going to progress, and a dearth of lawyers is already there in the country with regard to specialization in NDPS. The future demand right now tells you exactly why you should apprise yourself of the set of laws that are currently in force, so that you can have a better grasp at the policy matters, better grasp at what the history has dictated and what it will probably lead to years down the line, when, well, a lot of lakhs and a lot of crores will be given out by salaries by Amar Chand and whatever A-list, A-tier firms are at that point of time. And if you are very much apprised of that, that gives you a higher salary package, that increases the chances of you being able to claim as an equity partner later 10 years down or 20 years down your practice in the corporate field and in the licensing or the licensing sector of the Indian pharmacology industry, which, by the way, is one of the actually leading industries in India, growing at an unprecedented rate of 16% per year. So that tells you a lot about why NDPS. Now, the interesting facts about drugs is something that you probably have access to, and I'd advise you to go on YouTube and specifically research the benefits of cocaine, the benefits of marijuana, the benefits of consuming meth, the benefit of consuming LSD or things. But the important thing to keep in mind is that before you construe whatever advice I've given you across the 4 modules in the past is not an advertisement or not even meant to push you to consume drugs, but it's meant to invigorate a certain sense of curiosity, that why am I talking about this in the first place, and why are the leading researchers in the world also talking about this in the first place. It means that it is something that is dangerous for the reason that you can't meddle with it, or you can't just eat a pound of cocaine and feel like it's nothing, but there's a greater risk that you might die, you might enter into a stage of psychosis, you might not make it alive, or you might just be left in a coma where you can't do anything. And that is the case with other things as well. Like the great guy said, that what do you want in life? Do you want to kill yourself one cigarette at a time for 20 years in a row, or do you want to just burn yourself once forever, so and life is going to be sorted after that? I think the answer is very clear, that what I say is that this is a very delicate matter altogether for people who are in the research field, for people who have been subjugated to crimes which they believed in. And when I say they believed in, you can take up the example of Ross Ulbricht, as I mentioned in the last module, that he didn't create Silk Route or drug dealers or even the people who consume drugs. You can't treat them as bad people because of a certain stigmatization you have in your mind for the reason that they consume drugs. Just because you were told that drugs karna buri baat hai doesn't mean that drugs karna buri baat hai, right? Because, well, the curiosity dictates the fact that you should look deeper, you should look further. The reason that mom and dad get up in the morning and have chai is not because of the fact that वो बुरे लोग हैं और उनको ज़रूरत है. Or you can't classify people जो चाय नहीं पीते हैं या people जो चाय पीते हैं as बुरे और अच्छे. Similarly, you can't classify people जो cocaine या LSD या mushrooms करते हैं और जो नहीं करते हैं as बुरे और अच्छे लोग, because for the sole purpose that it has come into their life for a reason, and that reason might not be, clearly logical or philosophical at this point of time or spiritual, but the reason is that it is something that has been ignored for the longest time. And a lot of research in this field has led researchers to believe that ketamine has acted as the best antidepressant of all time, making people quit the most unhealthy habits that they've had, especially smoking. Mushrooms and LSD and MDMA have been touted as one of the best wonder drugs being given to people who are going through a depressive phase in their life, and have helped them dissociate and take a better analysis of things together from a third eye view when they have been going through a lot and they can't get out of their rut. And similarly, stimulants of coffee, stimulants of cocaine, stimulants of Adderall have been used by people suffering from ADHD for the longest time. And as we progress into a more developed world, we won't be suffering through the nuances of roti pani and having a shelter at home, but it'll be pretty much the troubles and the battles in our head. The mental battles, the psychological battles, which make us go to therapists, pay a lot of money for random chilling activities that we want to do over the weekend, play golf with our buddies at the age of 40, 50. And when we lose that connection to people in our daily lives, we often have to resort to a substance. Now, the conventional tribe will probably resort to a lesser substance, such as consuming, as something as simple as a pastry or a gudka piece after a meal, and that is giving them the kick to feel that the day is over, and the dopamine in their head will simply be regulated to the point that they can go to sleep. And somebody in a slightly more desperate situation will resort to things that give them a bigger dopamine rush. So as I was saying, that this is a very sensitive substance altogether, this is a very sensitive topic altogether, and right from a lot of scientific and medical applications and research going on before 1960s in the US and a lot of other developed nations in the world, it has now come to light after probably 50 years of battles going through because of a misconstrued war on drugs by Richard Nixon in US. The trajectory shows very clearly that the legalization is imminent. The fact that it'll need policy work for lawyers is imminent. The fact that licensing and everything will also happen is also imminent. And consequently, even for litigators, the amount of cases and the complications arising from there with regard to unlicensed things, with regard to newer substances, with regard to, again, trials being held for things that are yet to be criminalized and decriminalized, or whatever segregation the country is supposed to go through, will happen. And that comes to the fact that a lot of work needs to be done. And the opportunity in this case right now, as of today, exists purely as policy work for a lot of MPs who are in support of decriminalizing cannabis, such as several MPs from the state of Odisha, who have openly talked about that whether this should be criminalized or not, and they have clearly made a stand that it should be, to Dharamveer Gandhi, an MP from Punjab, who presented the bill before the Lok Sabha and tried having his own attempt towards just decriminalizing cannabis for personal consumption and medicinal purposes. So the opportunity is there. There clearly is a market over there. It's just taking its shape and form and segregating itself into a distinct form altogether, where if you're just a criminal lawyer or if you're just a civil lawyer, having the nuances of Supreme Court judgments or having the nuances of why somebody does something better, even something as simple as being able to service your client. Like I said, the nuances of basically just dealing with your client in the first place, that when somebody comes to you that I got caught with such and such thing, or I got a notice from so and so things, if you're as a lawyer stigmatized that kya बेवकूफ आदमी है, इसको पता नहीं है कि क्या करना है, it becomes impossible for your client to refer another client to you, and that's how you build your practice, right? Like in litigation, your practice will never be through your relatives or distant relatives. Either you're a son of a judge or a very seasoned advocate, and therefore you have that Kherati practice where you get the cases for the first 10 years of your life and you're set, or you're able to make your metal and cast everything because of the amount of research and the kind of client experience you provide. I mean, first generation lawyers you'll find probably of two types. People who are working, like not the ones. One will be the set of people who are very good at client servicing, so they can go and talk to people and address them and deal with them in a manner that the client really feels like associating with them. And the second set of lawyers are the people who are really good at what they do in court. They are really well versed with what the law is, what their drafting is, but they really do suck at, servicing a client because their academic bent of mind fails them at all points of time to just sit down with the client and explain the law to them in simple terms. And that is where I think all the opportunity for an NDPS expert is there in the country right now. And that's why you should probably just hit me up in case of any queries, and we can do a live session about why the drugs, what the drugs or offenses, or even any discussion on the policy matter or any set of judgments from the Supreme Court that I look forward to. With that, we'll conclude module 5 of the NDPS course course. In case you enjoyed it, please do drop in a review and let us know about all of it on your social media channels. We'll be more than happy to not just look to what you have said, but we are also looking for some sort of criticism as to how we could have done a better course since this is the first time. With that, we'll sign off. Let's wrap. Taka.